Thanks to all of our speakers this morning. Very insightful and informative words to take home and digest. We do have time for some questions if anybody has any thoughts or questions they'd like to ask any of the speakers. I believe we've got one in the back. Matt?
I would like to, we've talked a lot about the importance of educating those who are not familiar with the forestry industry more about what good we do. A huge opportunity is to get involved in these leadership groups that Andres talked about. I'm not as familiar with AGL, but I am with IGL and Leadership Georgia. And there are all kinds of people out there that really are leaders in what they're doing. And it gives us a great opportunity to get people involved. We've had a number of people involved, but I don't know that we have anybody in IGL this year. And I think you, as leaders in your organization, are getting people who are involved, upcoming leaders in your organization. It's a great opportunity.
Let me just second that. Again, I grew up in Georgia, had a chance to spend a lot of years in D.C., did some policy work up there in D.C., particularly around the manufacturing sector. And I'm going to just echo your comment greatly. When I first started Georgia Tech, many years ago, we knew the industry chairman, we knew everybody in the Georgia House, we knew the legislators, because we saw the application of technology for Georgia business as a competitive advantage. I've stepped away from years, but when I went to Washington, I got so tired of seeing Pennsylvania people coming in, Texas people coming in. I didn't see many Georgia people. Now, I'm going from the state level to the federal level, but Southern Pine is a national treasure, and we got to figure out how to continue to build that policy. So I'm going to endorse, just as an outsider, your comment. It's not only good for the individuals, it's good for the industry, and it's good for the companies to be involved in these programs.
Any other questions?
Hey everybody, I'm Lauren Griffith and I work with AGL, Advancing Georgia's Leaders in Agriculture and Forestry. Yes, so start off with some stage 5 language. Isn't this awesome? I mean, that we're here having this conversation and that this organization cares so much about developing leaders within this organization to really have such a grand impact on some challenges and innovations that we can have in the forestry industry in Georgia. So I applaud you, Andreas, for doing this and leading the charge, and so many of you guys around the room and ladies who've been a part of this effort for a number of years. It's awesome. So AGL does exist to help inspire leadership from within this group and agriculture. So I've got lots of questions, but I kind of limit it to a couple. But maybe first of all, you got some researchers up here, some amazing Georgia Tech researchers talking about leadership, innovation. We've got so much good information out there in leadership literature, and you guys presented a lot of that and a lot of bad information, right? So from a research perspective, tribal leadership is super sound and amazing. The innovation models that you're sharing, super sound and amazing from a research perspective. Kind of give us some insight into how do we disseminate the good and the bad information out there in leadership development. That's for the research folks. And then for Andreas, tell us a little bit more about your vision for leadership development and what this organization can do moving forward.
So, as long as people can write books and we can do them a lot cheaper than we ever could now, there's going to be information and the good and the bad. Here's what I do. My background is strategy, and yet I'm spending 95% of my time now on the topic of leadership. Well, leadership is made up of people, processes, and technology. I actually interact with people that are in organizational behavior, organizational design, and I rely on those people. I'll call Dennis up and say, Dennis, what do you think of this tribal leadership stuff? He says, So I use those diverse perspectives. And I also have go-to, in every field there are people that contributed and then people build on it. Peter Drucker is a great example. Jim Collins is a good example. And so what you find are a handful of stable individuals, and then you see the fringe. And In the academic world, it's sort of easy because we critique each other's work, and the fringe gets shot down pretty quick. So again, I would encourage you to connect to the people that this is their full-time job. You know, the business school at University of Georgia has got some great resources. Georgia State, Georgia Southern. I've met with some folks up there. Use those resources as a sounding board. Faculty love nothing more than you get a phone call and go, "Have you ever heard of X?" And I'll give you a real example. I've done some work with Gilman Building Products over the years. Our first relationship was I got a call from their CEO at the time. He said, "Have you ever heard of 7 Habits of Highly Successful People?" I said, "Oh yeah, that book was just published and we were looking at that book." This was 25 years ago, okay? Well, that established a long-term relationship around that topic. So use people, network.
And I'd add one quick other thing is look at organizations that are effective and then talk to the leaders of those organizations, because almost always they have read something or seen something that's been impactful in how they have operated their organizations or how they've structured their organizations. And they're usually willing to share that with you because they found it very helpful and meaningful. So look for those organizations that are exhibiting stage 4, stage 5 type of characteristics and say, so what are you reading? What are you looking at? What books do you have on your shelf that you are the go-to books for what you're doing? So.
Thank you. I appreciate you describing leadership as people, process, and technology. When I ran a manufacturing facility, every morning to come in and I wanted to know what happened with people, process, or equipment. Those are my 3 buckets. And we do that also to deploy capital and figure out where we needed to move the dial long term as well. So it was good to hear that again. In terms of where we're going with leadership programs and the vision, there's a lot that's being discussed that I wish I could tell you right now, but I don't want to get ahead of our process and our key stakeholders that still need to give us approval to move forward on some things. And in terms of ideas, there's none of it turns into anything unless we can get it funded. So there's lots of landmines out there for me to give you everything that we've discussed and the ideas that have come forward. But what I can tell you is that there's a lot of great programs. Yours is one of them. And as we think about leadership development, we think about it systematically and strategically. And it doesn't do us one bit of good if we go out there and recreate things that you and other people are doing and simply just end up competing with that. What we want to be able to do is complement that and also fill in the gaps with where we're at. There's a lot of things that are particular to what we do in our industry that we need folks to have depth on. It's not just talking points that get you across the finish line at the end of the day, is what I'm trying to say. You need to understand how taxes work at your local level if you're going to be able to apply any kind of pressure or find a solution at the state level. There's multiple layers to the onion, is what I'm trying to say. You got to peel them all back, and you need like any good chef, you need folks that can cut all the way down to the bottom, see what you got, and then rebuild from the inside out to come up with good solutions. So for us, it's a lot about that's one component. That's a strategic component. The other component is like I said, we start at home. Before we ever try to find a champion outside of our industry, let's start with what we've got at home, and let's get the folks that we know have potential to do great things over a course of a 20 or 30-year career. Let's give them the tools to be able to be empowered and the confidence to be able to go out there and make a difference over the course of their career. And I think that if we do that, think about the impact of doing that over 5 years or 10 years, and having 100 or 200 people that can go into any audience, into any community, tackle any issue almost, and do it effectively to affect the way that people think about policy or think about our industry in general, from the highest levels down to the nitty-gritty of how you assess land from a county tax perspective or water rights or whatever that might be. It's a powerful impact. Did you get a question?
You spoke about tribal stages 1 through 5, and I was wondering if you could comment about our corporate annual reviews, performance reviews that seem to drive us to tribal stage 3, I am great.
Thank you for raising that. Because I had a question. If you didn't have any questions, I had a question for you, and that is, why do most of us sit at stage 3? I'm opening it up. I want the answer. Why do most of us sit at stage 3? What's 50% roughly, right? Sit at stage 3. Anybody? Personal gain, okay. But why is it that way? What system? But before the corporate. But what fundamental institution drove us that way? Public school. How many of you in public school got credit for the team project? You got to take that test as a team, right? You were a highly networked organization in middle school, right? You all got to work. No. You got a grade, and your grade was different from their grade, and they posted the grade. Well, in my day, they posted the grades, right? And you said, I was the best, you know? And so we drove that stage 3 culture. We've driven it. It's why most of us sit there, and a lot of us have a hard time getting out of it, all right? So you think about the organizations. Now, Georgia Tech is doing something somewhat interesting called the inverted classroom, and they're starting to really think about some of those processes and how that structure is. And so you think about all of our institutional processes for, the day we hit school, preschool, it's all about the individual performance. It goes all the way from elementary school all the way up through retirement. And particularly if you have a heavy sales-oriented program, you build your incentive structures around bonuses for outperforming your other people, because who are you measured against? The rest of your team, right? So when you start thinking about a stage 4 organization, you've got to rethink fundamentally a lot of these structures. So that's a great question. In terms of performance review, I'm not a big fan of annual performance reviews. I'm going to just tell you right now, if I had my way, we'd get rid of them. I prefer a management model that focuses on one-on-one conversations weekly, 15, 20 minutes, doesn't take a long time, all right? Positive and productive feedback. Productive means it can be a little negative sometimes, but productive. Not just negative for negative sakes, productive feedback, all right? And then team building programs, right? In other words, reward people who are actually driving stage 4 performance or stage 4 behaviors. And you got to do it consistently throughout the year, right? Because the other thing you can do is give mentorship. And remember, culture is what? The language we use and imitation. Well, how are they going to imitate if they only get feedback from you formally one time a year? It just doesn't work, right? So it's an antiquated system, in my opinion. I'm waiting for the Uber of performance reviews to come about, because I'll be an early adopter if I'm allowed to, just because I don't find them as effective as they should be. So great question. Thank you.
Let me add on to that. Some industries are changing and they're experimenting with this, and I would say being innovative. But think about innovation as adding value to the market. A rather large consulting firm has done away with their individual evaluations. Now, before you get excited, their market fits. It's real simple. All their works are projects, and without getting into a lot of detail, ultimately we're going to do a lot of project work. That's the whole industry is moving to project base. But because they've embraced the technology, information technology, if I'm on an employee of theirs, my resume and all my skills and experience are on the computer system, and so people can choose and ask me to work on the project. And so they don't really care about the innovation, the evaluation system, because what they've discovered is the really good people that add a lot of value to the firm are always busy. Matter of fact, they have to turn down projects. And the people that aren't very good are what they call on the beach. That means they have nothing to do. They're hitting an overhead account because there's nobody asking them to work on a project. So it's sort of an interesting experiment going on right now, because who's in charge of developing and long range and et cetera. So it's a little bit of an Uber type situation going on in this firm, but there's a couple others that are also experimenting with this. So in the next few years, we'll be reading more about it. But think about it from that perspective. Employees that add value because they contribute, they network, they connect people. They're just, that's what they do, and they're the ones that we want to emulate.
I think we have time for one more question.
Garrett, questions for you, and again, thanks for this panel. Question would be, maybe have your young professionals group challenge your leadership of the association next year to 3 programs that were laid out, to maybe set a goal that each year our association sponsors three individuals from the emerging leaders to represent the association on the IGL on Georgia, Leadership Georgia, and our ag program, maybe to have us look into that and challenge us to help support that. And Brian, and then it's great to see every session that we've had to have the the Agribusiness Council here as we work shoulder to shoulder, and also like to maybe challenge the agribusiness to maybe consider doing the same thing. Imagine if from this day forward we had six individuals from ag and forestry represented in these programs, where we might be in 10 years. So thanks again.
Thank you. Yes, well, that's the topic that we may dive into a little bit more at our upcoming meeting here in this room for the Emerging Leaders Group. So we'd like to thank our speakers this morning and present them with a gift. Let's give them one more round of applause. Andres will provide some closing words to end the conference. Thanks.
Thank you, Garrett. I appreciate that. And yeah, I do want to thank Brian Toller and Jonathan for being here from the Agribusiness Council. They are our foxhole buddies, is what we call them. When we're at the Capitol and the bullets are flying, you know that they got your back. So we certainly appreciate everything and the relationship and everything that you guys have done too as well. Well, thank you. That concludes our sessions for the 2016 GFA Annual Conference. I want to thank all of you for being here, and certainly remind you of those 3 words. Through GFA, you're protected, connected, and empowered. So let's go out there and have another solid year of supporting the association. Thank you for your support of the association, and please drive home safely. Take care.